Hey everybody, welcome back to the Finding Financial Fitness Show. Pei, how you doing?
Doing great. It's been a long time since we last talked to each other.
It feels like it. It does. If it's like if I'm not talking to you every hour about I mean literally every hour, there's some form of communication, be it directly with you, via chat, via business, via
Yeah.
whatever. There's some
We're
sort of
definitely a speed dial relationship right now.
yeah, yeah.
For
Like I
sure.
remember there was one time where uh my wife was like, I think you talked to Peyton when you talked to me. I was like, yeah, that's probably true. There was a time. There was a time for sure.
Good thing, good thing I am good friends with her too.
Exactly. Well, I mean, and it's funny because that's like exactly what we're talking about today, right? It's a big topic of something that's been on our minds is discussing friendships, cultivating friendships, maintaining friendships, and just as we expand and as we grow. I've shared our story, like, or from my perspective of meeting you at the time in my life where I felt like I had ascended to not the peak of my career, but to the peak of where I wanted to be, meaning I knew what was left as a registered dietitian. Like I had gotten to the clinical dietitian one, two, three, having few years under my belt. Next up was clinical nutrition manager, overseeing the nutrition operations, and that was pretty much it. And I didn't want to go there anymore. Once I started getting into the finance world, I felt again like a baby. I was fresh in. It was everyone that I listened to and learned from. There was always something to learn from and then look forward to. And you were the kind of the first real mentor that I had in this world, and that I was lucky enough for us to become friends because you understood my philosophy, you understood my mindset, and we kind of just clicked, right? We were on the same wavelength. And something that you had briefly mentioned before we started the show and we had been talking about was friendships that we individually had before we started this fitness journey, right? And where we were, or fitness journey, financial journey, and where we are now. And do we have those same friendships at the moment, right?
Mm.
And how do those friendships then respond and react? So tell me from your perspective about what's been your experience when it comes to, as you've progressed and throughout all your career and your experience, have you noticed friendships falling off, friendships strengthening?
Um, a little bit of both, to be honest. I think first and foremost, I value. I'm not a people pleaser, but I'm not a loner type personality, right?
Right.
I like people. And in general, I like to be surrounded with people. I'm an extrovert, so being with people recharges me. Like I don't feel
Yeah.
drained and whatnot. And I love learning new things because I feel like I'm always on a learning um, journey to learn, right? Like opportunity to
Sure.
learn from people. So when I transitioned out of the traditional workforce, that was a huge, huge shock to me and I think my personal uh friend group as well, because I think there was a lot of like, hey, let's wait and see that she comes back, right? To
Okay.
this, the comfort zone, um, it's what everybody's familiar with, and when someone decides to leave because of a better opportunity or they're doing something completely different, it tends to disrupt the peace, right? Or
Sure.
the comfort level of everybody, because we're herd animals, right? We like to be in the herd, everybody going to the right direction. That's where everybody feels comfortable. Nobody's rocking the boat much. But when something like that disrupts the group, I think it leads to uncertainty. I think it starts to poke people like in places where they're uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like all of a sudden you're having conversation where people don't even didn't even like think about before,
Right.
right? And that could be
Yeah.
uncomfortable for a lot of people, so definitely experience that. But I'm
Okay.
grateful that I was able to maintain some friendships, from before, because those are very, very valuable to me, right?
Right.
um in fact, like if I have a magic wand and I can do things right? If I have a magic wand where this transition thing was perfectly the way I had planned, it would have been that everybody came with me on
Of
this
course.
journey together, right? And of
Right.
course, I understand that's not possible, but I feel very blessed and lucky that at least one or two people,
Hmm.
or maybe actually maybe more than one or two, but quite a few people, um, valued my opinion and my thoughts and my desire to, move to the next phase of my life, and wasn't discouraging. They were encouraging. They may not be as aggressive, right, in
Right.
following what I'm doing, but they
But
were
they
definitely,
respect it.
yeah, they respect it, and they were
Yeah.
like, hey, you know what? Tell us what you do, and if it's good, I'm willing to follow. Which
Yeah.
to me is huge, huge level of trust,
Oh, for
and
sure.
and that's very rare to find. So I definitely, for those people, that did that, shout out to them. They know who they are.
You know who you are. If you're reading this, this is for you. No,
Yeah.
I definitely, something that I think has been a challenge, I think that I've dealt with, and people that I've spoken with at different levels, it's, you have your friend group, maybe that you, whether you went to college with, or your 20s, your 30s, whatever age group, you have your friends for that time frame, and they're still doing the same things that they were doing. And
Mhm.
then you as an individual want to grow, want to make more money, want to become a better person, want to become healthier, and they don't necessarily have that desire to change and to grow. And when they see you doing that, it almost for them feels like a reminder of what they're not doing, and they get insecure about that. And so naturally, you either have two options. You either stay in that comfort zone with your friend group and what you know, or you evolve and then you progress into a new phase and into a new part of your life. But I think the thing that doesn't get addressed is when you adapt and when you grow into that new phase of life, sometimes it could get pretty lonely.
True.
And the problems that you then face, that you face yourself at that next phase, are not the same problems that your old friends or the old you were dealing with. Now, yeah, maybe you have a little bit more money, right? Maybe you have a little bit more peace, maybe you have a little bit more control, and your other friends might be still working their 9 to 5, still working their jobs, still kind of just working to put food on the table. And if you ever try to catch up with them and you kind of share your struggles, they think of it as like, oh, boohoo, rich man cries
First world
about
problems.
first
First
world
world
problems.
problems. Yeah.
Correct. And so something that I've kind of realized is being lonely at the top of your own mountain. There's the, I think when people talk about being at the quote unquote top, that's such a vague thing, because what's the top of the financial world? Bezos, like, who are we talking about? There's a huge barrier that we can discuss when it comes to the top.
Mhm.
But I'm talking about the top of your own world and your own friend circle. How do you then, what do you do? Do you then get to the top and want to reach and bring people out and bring them up with you? Or do you just say, I'm going to keep on climbing and I'm going to go to the next mountain, and hopefully, like me, you find somebody like you who,
Yeah.
I'm climbing this new ladder and I see, oh, look, there's Pei, and there's Mike, and there's this new community of people. But then what comes after that, right? It comes to the question of, when is enough enough? And then it comes to, how far do you want to keep going, and how alone do you want to be?
Right.
Because something that I think is really challenging as well is making friends in college, making friends in high school when you're younger, I think is easier because you're around that. How do you then cultivate friendships with people organically, especially in today's, social world where we're kind of isolated more in the social media sense? What do you think? How do you cultivate new friendships with people that have similar mindsets?
And that is the challenge that, I'm still grappling with, to be honest. Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird because luckily we, the French circle that we currently have, that I'm part of, it's it's like a mixture of, it's not just like people that I went, for example, if I went to a networking event and I met someone and I had a good connection with them, and then we started talking and whatnot, that almost feels a little bit shallow and superficial, right?
Okay.
It's harder to really become friends and start caring about, like I know you and I know your wife. I like eventually I'm pretty sure I'm gonna meet your father-in-law and your
Oh,
whole
I
extended
know.
family, right?
Yeah.
So we become like deep entrenched in each other's life, or intertwined like more and more, as you develop that friendship over the years. But I think that's part of it is because we belong to a organization. There's a sense of something bigger than ourselves,
Sure.
right?
Makes sense.
And that allows us to have that common ground, which I think, blessings to us that we're able to do that. But it's, before I met you, right? Obviously, I was on this investment journey alone for a little bit, and it was definitely a challenge.
Mm.
I really didn't feel like I've found like I didn't feel like I was on solid ground. I don't
Mm.
know how to describe that feeling. I knew I was on the right track, but I didn't feel like what I was doing was solid.
Well, you had no one, you had no validation. You had no one
Mhm.
to really talk it through with again, outside of your immediate, your husband. But even
Mhm.
then, you can get trapped into your own household
Yeah,
of you bounce an idea, they reflect, they say, oh, that's a good idea. But when you go
right,
out into the real world, then you find out, is that truly a good idea? Or did I just
right,
convince my significant other that my idea was correct? And
right.
and I love having the community aspect because you're able to meet people and meet people from that. Meaning, like myself, like I'll come in and then join the community and I'll have friends or previous coworkers that I'm like, hey, you need to check this out. And pretty soon they end up coming in and we try to all get together. And then your friends become my friends and my friends become your friends. And that's typically how social circles tend to work. But there's only so many people that, within that community that you'll if I tell 10 people, if you tell 10 people, not all 10 people are going to get into it, maybe one or two. And then out of
Mhm.
those 1 to 2 people, maybe they only tell 1 or 2 people. So you can see how it dwindles down the potential growth. And so that can be frustrating. And I don't want to say people hear the word lonely and they think of it being sad. And I do think it could be a sad feeling if not done and addressed correctly. I think having a
Right.
good core group of friends, like really close friends, I think is huge and very important. And I think just being able to get and let people know, like I remember you always mentioned this about when you left teaching, like your identity, right? It was what's the I remember this question, this comment that I read in a book about when Americans go, like this American went abroad and he was in France. And the first thing he met this guy at a bar, and the first thing the American asked the Frenchman was, what do you do? And the Frenchman looked at him a little bit baffled and said, oh, I like to dance. I like to have dinner with my wife. I like to,
Mhm.
do this. And then the Frenchman asks the American, well, what do you do for work? He said, oh, I'm an engineer. And then the French guy laughs and says, you Americans are so your identity is so based on what you do or for
Yeah.
work, not for
Mhm.
leisure. Whereas other parts of the world, they take that as it's what do you enjoy doing? And typically for most people, the work they do isn't necessarily what they enjoy. They work to make money to then do the leisure activities that they want. And part of what we're trying to do with our conversations is instead of going all this way around, let's try to connect a straight line. Let's go from,
Yeah.
okay, what are you doing and what makes you happy? And how can we use money as a tool to get you to that point a little bit
Right.
faster?
And it's funny because my mentor Chris Bay, that we interview, he's a great he's a great person at asking these type of questions, right?
Mm.
So when you meet him, he's not interested in what your profession is, or
Oh my goodness.
what's your education level. He's not interested in any of that aspect of your life. I mean, those are important, obviously, but he really right away wants to know you, and he will ask you like question
He'll ask you,
like,
this is a Chris question. He'll ask you, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Chris Bay. So tell me about the trauma you had when you were 11 years old. Oh, Chris, if you're listening to this, man, you're an incredible human
shout
being.
out to Chris. Shout out to
Shout out
Chris.
to Chris Bay. But you're
But
right.
I
You're
just
right.
I haven't developed that comfort level of asking these type
Yes.
of questions, but I would love to. I would love to be able to meet someone and just ask them like, hey, if you don't have to do what you currently are doing to make money, like your job
Hmm.
anymore, what would you be doing?
Yeah. Yeah. And
right?
oftentimes that will, and here we're talking about different age gaps. And I think that this is where age plays a huge role into it,
Mhm.
because talking to somebody, that general question, no matter what age gap, you go up to any random person on the street and ask them that question, they're going to look at you like you're crazy.
Mm,
Like 10 times out of 10, you maybe one person might give you a half-hearted answer, but most of the time you won't get an answer. And what I was saying with ages is you're going to get different, the person is going to naturally think, what is this person's intention? Like,
mm,
what's them? Like, what do they want? What do they want from me? And something that I've been learning about is the confidence component of, if the person you ask that question to reflects back an answer of just like looking at you, kind of giving you a dirty look, giving you a question, that's not a reflection on you asking the question. That's a reflection on them and their own comfort with themselves. Because
mm,
people who are very, Chris Bay as an example, who are very in tune with their emotions and are very aware, will appreciate and value that question, because they know how difficult it is to find somebody who would A, be willing to ask the question, and B, be willing to answer the question. So I think that is a good barometer, but just you have to know that doing that, you're going to naturally weed people out. Most people you're going to ask that to, it's going to be weird. And I know this because I had a lot of friends growing up in college, and even now at my age, that are in the dating world. And I'm just so glad I'm not in the dating world right now, because holy cow, it would just be a mess. But even in that, it's the conversations are so superficial. Cultivate
mm,
the same strengths you need to cultivate friendships are the same strengths to cultivate relationships. A friendship is just a different form of a relationship, albeit it's not romantic. But if you really want to truly get to know somebody, you're not going to get to know them by asking them what their favorite color is or what they do for work. It's at one step beyond that. Like, why did you choose the career that you chose? And what is that career? And like you said, that question is great. What would you do if money wasn't an issue? And something that I'm hoping that we can do with this podcast and be honest, I'm hoping that the people that we attract to this show are like-minded people. I think people who are naturally on this episode have made it through, have already gotten a gist of what we're doing, right? Who we are and what we like to talk about. And we're hoping with this that we can, people feel free to reach out and just say, hey, I've had similar thoughts to you, and ask those questions, because that's how we're going to build a community. Just like we are in the, again, I say this all the time. This podcast is a reflection of our current journey. And we're in the journey of, we want to find more people like us, because it makes it more exciting. There's times where we meet people on our community chat and it's like, oh my God, you think just like me, right? And it's
yeah.
so exciting.
And I want to reference that too, because on that chat group that we belong to, and it's just so funny because I like to meet people. I try to, wherever I travel to, I try to,
Mhm.
gather a crowd, and I just love to meet
Yeah,
and part of it is because we have a very unique space, and I think people can go out there and create that if they don't have it
of course.
currently, right? You can go out and create that, where people already kind of pre-share some of these, like people share a lot of stuff
Yeah.
on that chat that I bet they don't even share
With
with
family.
their family,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I myself included. Like
For sure.
my family know very little about
Yeah.
the way I think, and they know
Oh,
that I'm
yeah.
doing well and I'm okay, I'm healthy and whatnot. Of course, that's basic, but like a lot of the deeper stuff that I even share on the chat with people, like, or even sometimes even just my thought process, right?
Yeah.
That's a platform for me to kind of I don't want to use the word vomit, but like I vomit on people, like
Yeah.
whatever's happening right now in my head, I'm gonna just let it out because that's how I process information.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I do meet people on the chat, like, and if I can recognize their name and match their story and remember what they've said, it's incredible. It's almost like, oh my God, I feel
We've
like
been
I've been
friends.
friends with you for
Right.
years already because
Right.
I already know. I may not know your favorite color or what's your favorite food, but a, I know these people
More important things.
on a deeper level,
Yeah.
shockingly, than
Yeah.
people that I may see, for Sunday brunch on a weekly basis, even,
Right.
right? Because those conversations can be very shallow. It could be just like, mindless gossip or whatever, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But like the hopes and dreams type of questions that never gets asked in person
Hmm.
actually gets asked in that community of ours, which is
Yeah.
very, very rare. So that's why
Right.
I do treasure that little group that we have. And I feel like, and actually that's I just started picking up reading a book, and the title of it is pretty catchy, right? It's
Hmm.
what the rich people don't want you to know,
Hmm.
or something like that. And one of the things that this guy laid out like 8 steps of what um things rich people do that the average individuals are not aware of out there.
Hmm.
And one of the things was to create a community.
Really?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right? You gotta be you want to be part of or create, if you're not part of right now, a community of like-minded people, because that's what rich people do.
I'll never. There's this meme going around on social media. People were like, they kind of make, it's like a meta meme where they make fun of people who say the things like your network is your net worth, right? You hear that all the time, right?
Yeah, your
People,
net worth is your network, something like
yeah.
that.
So people will, you'll have guys who will post pictures in a suit, and they'll
Mm-hmm.
put that caption: your net worth is your network is your net worth. And then people will call them out and say, dude, you put that suit on for a wedding, you weren't going to a business meeting. Like, but it's so in vogue to say things like that. and
Mm-hmm.
and to have a, but just having a network like we talked about, there's multiple mixers and get-togethers where you can go to a seminar or these classes where you just meet random people and you go to learn about an investment topic, an investment strategy. That is a good place to start, because at least there's some general interest and some similarities, and it's better than meeting somebody at the bar, most likely.
Yeah.
But even then, it's going to be very difficult because you're in a sales type of environment where it's almost competitive, but you're also like, okay, well, I don't know where this person's coming from. So it could actually be detrimental to what you're trying to do. And the reason why I bring this up is just because asking questions of even people that you meet at those seminars, people that you just meet from a family of a friend, you can ask the question. And if you don't get a decent response, or a response that you deem is appropriate, where they kind of just brush it off, well, that's okay. At least you know, and at least you're making the effort. And
Mm-hmm.
going to, I think one of the biggest things on one of the books that I read was, the book title was the top five regrets of the dying. So they'll talk to them on their deathbed, and they'll ask, like, what are things that the top five things you wish you would have done more throughout your lifetime, or that you want people to know. And one of them is, I wish I would have kept in better contact with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been multiple studies talking about. So I'm sure people have read or have seen the show Live to 100 on Netflix, where they talk about these concepts of blue zones, right? Where there's these hotbeds throughout the world where there's a high concentration of centenarians, so people that live to 100. So
Yeah.
you have one in Japan, in Osaka, Japan, in Sardinia, in Italy, in Loma Linda, in California. So you have these pockets, and they go to these places and they interview and they ask them, and all of them, every single one of those communities, or one of those countries, they all talk about the emphasis of community. They all talk about the emphasis of the value of their friends. And I saw that just being in Japan. I could see that amongst the families and the friends that were traveling together, that would see themselves. You notice that you're eating in a restaurant that's only has 15-20 people available to sit down, and most people coming in are not tourists. Most people coming in are friends that go every week, and they're in a little mini group together. And so the value of quality friendships is so important. And again, going back to, people neglect those things, specifically friendships, because they need to go to work and they need to make more money, thinking that that's going to then bring them happiness, when they're sacrificing the thing that they want, right? Just friendships,
Mm-hmm.
to get something that will eventually bring them the thing that they just gave up, right? And I always talk
Yeah.
about this: don't give up what you're gonna want anyways. So that's why I always try to make it a point. I try to tell people, like, make it a point to spend time with friends, and not just family, because people say, oh, well, it's my blood, it's my blood. But you and I have spoken about this multiple times. Just because you're related to somebody doesn't mean that they have they care about who you are, or they want to know about who you are. Sometimes the closest friends that you have are going to be more of a family to you than your own family, as sad as that is.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what that whole term chosen family, right?
Yep.
Like your family's your family. I get it, no matter what. If when there's something happen, you all everybody band together, and that's just the power of that blood connection. But your chosen family, that's even more powerful, right? Because you and I, we don't have to hang out, but we choose. Right. It's a
Right.
conscious decision,
Right.
right? It's a conscious decision for us to say, like, hey, if you're not doing anything this weekend, let's get together and,
Yep.
spend time together. Because time ultimately is the most precious gift that we have to give to
Yep.
each other, right? Like for Christmas, we can give each other gifts and never see each other. And then you don't even remember what I sent you, right, in the mail. But the time that we spent sharing that meal together, that's more
Mm-hmm.
meaningful than the trinkets or material things, right? So,
Right.
so in some ways, like I think the more financially stable people get, they do tend to become less materialistic because
Mm-hmm.
you realize like the material things cannot replace that connection and relationship that you have with people.
Well, I also, that's a good point. And just the thought that came to mind right now is the wealthier people get, the less materialistic they get, and therefore they spend more time. But also, when people get more money and they're using the money effectively, they tend to then trade their money for time, right? And something I always say is, when it's one thing when you have money to then start asking the self-reflective questions. But when you don't have money and you're
Mm,
barely scrapping by and you're trying to feed your family, you're trying to keep food on the table, you're not thinking about these things.
yeah.
And rightfully so. I rightfully so. Your priorities are survival. And if you get some money, saving it and doing what you can with it. And I think that the wealthier people just have more time in general because they've learned how to value their time, and they trade their money for
Yeah.
time, and then they use that time that they have freed up to, okay, well, what else am I going to do with my time? Either A, i'm going to learn I'm going to learn more about myself, because if you have all the time in the world, if all the little chores, the cleaning, the cooking, the laundry, the grocery shopping, if all the little things that take up a lot of your time are now off of your plate, what do? You focus on leisure, right? But there's only so many hobbies you can go about doing before you then eventually just have a moment to yourself and you realize, all right, I need to face me, like who I am, and be with myself. So when people have more time, they either A, start spending more time with themselves, which is, I think, is very beneficial, or B, start spending more time with others. And herein also lies the dilemma with cultivating new friendships. I can call you and tell you, hey, Paige, do you want to hang out Tuesday morning at 11 a.m.? And you'll be like, all right. But most people, especially most people my age, I'm calling them, you want to hang out Tuesday at 11? The hell are you talking about? I'm working. Like,
Right, right,
it's a
right.
silly question, and it's true. It's understandable, and I know, being able to come home from work, the last thing you're gonna want to do is go out. You want to just be like, man, I had a rough day. I just want to sit down. And when the weekend comes, you're just kind of catching up on just relaxing a little bit before the insanity of Monday starts again. So that is a genuine problem. That, yeah, first world problems, but I you can become more reflective as you have more money, because now the biggest stressor in your life typically is money. And if you take that element out, money, well, what fills that void of stress?
That's almost like a good question to ask, to add to our repertoire of questions to ask people, right? It's, if you were gifted with an additional hour per day,
Ooh,
right? What
yeah.
would you do with that hour? Because I think
Okay,
that
well,
says a lot about the person.
let me turn that question on you.
Mhm.
Answer it.
Depends on the time, right? Of course,
Yeah.
at this moment right now, if I have an extra hour per day, I will probably read more. You were just we were just joking like how I read. I typically look at the content.
Table of contents
I,
done.
I get the book, I read the front, I read the back, and I read the table of content, and then I go straight to the because I feel like I'm crunched for time in that sense, right? I
Sure,
don't have time to
sure.
read, a bunch of 10 pages in. I'm still in the introduction page. That I feel like that's like, okay, I need a cliff
Yeah.
note for this. But if I have an extra hour a day, I would like to read more. I would like to be more diverse
Mm,
in my reading. We were just at Target yesterday, walking around buying stuff, and then I was like, wow, I haven't like bought a book from like just like when you go into a bookstore and you just
yeah.
browse and catch a book that's not a topic specific book anymore,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
Because I think I'm just tunnel vision. Like the book that I saw of all the books that's there, guess what? It was Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Oh my goodness. Oh, if there's
And it
ever a
wasn't
book
even
that's
like
needed,
it wasn't even on like the middle shelf. It was on the very bottom, like, it's Target.
hidden
So
behind. Yeah.
right, a different population of people buying books. But
Sure.
I'm like, wow, even in this obscure position, I still saw that book. It's
It's
just
a
like,
it's a
I think
purple book. You can't ignore
right.
that.
Like my
But you're looking.
radar
Yeah,
is
you search for
yeah,
what you're looking for.
exactly. Yeah. But what about you? What would you do with that hour?
Oh man. I should have prepared myself because I just asked you. There's a couple of things. I think I would try to spend that hour forcing myself to do nothing. And
Mm.
what I mean by that is that's a very vague thing. I know. It's like eliminating stimulus as much as possible. So that could be meditating. That could be so maybe meditate for 30 minutes, maybe go on a walk. I just it frustrates me with this heat in Houston because I like sometimes at 2, 3 o'clock I want to go on a walk and I'm like, good God, I can't go. Like my
No.
walks have to be done before 6:30. Otherwise, that's it. Like the humidity
Right.
and the heat. If I lived somewhere where it was cooler, I would probably walk way more frequently than I do now. So to answer that question, probably meditate, probably walk, or just find another hobby or leisure activity that I genuinely enjoy doing, whether it's something mindless like playing video games with my spouse just because that's fun. It takes if something that can fully take myself out of my brain.
Yeah.
When we talked about on our
Funny,
last show. Yeah.
both of us are going to spend that hour doing non-income producing activity.
That's
You
true.
notice that, right?
That's true. That's the last thing I want to do because the thing is I don't want to do anything that's income producing or in my case fitness ways rise because I know like the majority of my day is already spent doing that because that's what I prioritize. Like quite simply, that is what I prioritize in life is my fitness and my finances. Hence why we're doing this podcast. We practice what you preach, like the
Mhm.
simplest. But I know that those two things will always take priority. So when I have time left over, if I'm not intentional, that's my word of 2024, by the way, was being intentional. If
Mhm.
I'm not intentional with my time, my fallback is always going to be work, make more money, or spend more time in the gym. That's it. Like
Yeah.
that's all I know, you know? That's and is what it is.
Yeah. So we got to make that hour happen now.
Well, I think that's for me personally, I think that that's what I spend a lot of my time doing, like knocking out the purpose of, and everyone has a to-do list. Everyone has
Mhm.
their own version of their what they have to do. The whole purpose of knocking those things out is to free up more time. And again, the sooner you can identify whether it's a big goal or a small goal, the sooner you can identify what you're going to do at that time, the more motivated you're going to be to get that stuff done. And then you'll know what to do at that time. And I can speak from experience here. There has been plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get done with these to-do listings. And I get done with them. And then I sit there and I'm like, okay, well, now what am I going to do? I
Make
don't
another
know what
list.
to make. Exactly. Make another list. Or I just default
Mm.
back to fitness and finance. So
Right.
being intentional is so important. That's something I learned from you actually. So when we talked about at the end of last year of, reflecting on 2023 and going into 2024.
But that's I love these questions because I don't I often you're not going to ask yourself that question, right? You're not going to just be a
Yeah.
weirdo randomly going around and like, I wonder what I would do if I hit the lottery and have all these time.
Hey,
But
to be fair, I do ask myself those questions. I do. Like I have some I have some interesting conversations with myself, so I will caveat that.
Okay.
I do.
Okay. But that's I think a good way to, as we go into this journey of making new friends, I've decided that's that's just how it's gonna have to be, right?
Mhm.
I am going to I have actually started to just kind of like been looking at like maybe this event I'm gonna go, right?
Yeah,
And just even if I'm just an observer in
sure.
the event, like um, it'll be a good way to practice asking these questions and then finding out more about people on a deeper level than just the shallow typical what do you do. I love that, right? When I
Mhm.
say what do you do, I don't mean what you do for work. I mean what do you do? Like what do you like to do with your time? You
Yeah,
know,
it's the same thing
that's
as asking people like, "Oh, how are you?" And then there's the generic, vague, "Fine." No, no,
right.
how are you? Like
Mm-hmm.
genuinely, I had a conversation with somebody yesterday who I hadn't spoken with in a couple of months. I mean, she's a business partner of ours, and it was like when she asked me like, "How are you?" I knew it was like a genuine "How are you?" Not just a vague "Hey, how's it going?" It was a genuine like, "How are you?" And I had to pause and I thought, and I'm like, "How am I?" Because we go on and we do our thing, and as simple just having a friend or having a person, even just an acquaintance who asks you and genuinely cares about your answer of "How are you?" I think it's so powerful because it makes you kind of get out of your head and you just say, "Hey, I'm doing fine, but I'm having a problem with this, or this has been on my mind lately." And then you
Mm-hmm.
get their feedback. And I think that's huge. That's the cultivation of friendship, which is what I mean, something that's what we wanted to focus on today was talking about just primary focus, cultivating friendships and maintaining and growing existing friendships, but understanding the battles that are associated sometimes with existing friendships and understanding that as you're going, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you're motivated by starting a new journey, or you've been on your journey and you're kind of pivoting right now. And maybe this is something that you've encountered, or maybe it's something you haven't encountered yet, but this is something that will likely come up where your friendships, your pre-existing friendships going into your journey might not be what get you to that next phase. And it's important to be able to be reflective of that and say, if everyone around you is not supporting you and is almost hindering you, it's something to reflect on. I've mentioned the quote before, so have you, about you're the top, you're the sum of the top 5 people you hang out with the most. That is huge. And being aware of that. And if all of your top 5 friends are just working generic jobs and have no motivation and no desire to get out and to have more and to aspire more for themselves, but you do, don't let them tame you. Understand that there is people out there that are just like you. And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes having those difficult conversations. And it's not to say you're better than the person. It's just having the conversation and the courage to say, look, I'm on this journey and I'm trying to do this for myself. And I want you as my friend to support me. But if you can't, I understand, but this is what I need to do. And ultimately, you'll be hopefully lucky enough to meet people like Pei, like the people we've met multiple times. I think that that's huge. And that's one thing. Second thing is being able to don't be afraid, have courage, have confidence, because you never know who you're gonna meet. You never, it might not be your intention to do business with this person. You're just curious because you want to talk to them. And then the next thing you find out, they're in this cool business venture that you want to be involved in, and look at what happened. You've made a friend, made a business partner. So many things can happen if you kind of just put yourself out there. So
For
I think
sure.
I think friendships, community are so valuable in just life in general, our well-being, our mental health, and it makes life so much better. So anything final you
Well,
want to add to that?
we're gonna have to add a fourth F to this podcast: finding financial
Financially fit friends.
fit friends.
you know, hey, if we can have our own community, we can do that. Finding
Yeah,
financially fit friends. There you go.
yeah.
4 Fs. No, it's cool. I like that. I like that. Because I think we're already in a niche of people who are interested in learning about their finances and about their fitness. That's rare to find
Mhm.
that combination together. And people listening now hopefully are in those two generic terms, but have brought them together with this show, and there's that general interest. And so that right there is its own little community that we can create
Yeah.
from that's exciting.
And that's it, right? Find that community, find that connection, maybe one or two or three things that are common, and
Mm.
that will take you to the next level. I'm confident, like having gone through that now, I'm like, this is
Yeah,
it. This is the way to go for
for
sure.
sure.
Hmm.
I love it. Well, everybody, thank you again for tuning in. It's been a fun one talking about friendships. Stay tuned for the next show. We look forward to speaking again soon. Talk to you soon, Pei.
All righty. Bye.